important. The worst parents of teenagers I've ever met are unbelievably empathetic. You're feeling so much pain. I'll call your teacher. I'll try to relieve your pain. That's terribly uncompassionate ordinarily, because people need to actually grow up, and people need to feel the pinch.
Down your reactions and your thoughts and what's making you feel stressed, and dealing with that dealing with it that way. And one of the other things that you talk about, the power of a journal to help with, is gratitude. I mean, we hear a lot about gratitude these days, and sometimes I think it's lost its real meaning, in the sense that, we hear it a lot. It's become almost cliched. But you talk about it in the book as something incredibly important, this really significant part of making our lives better and becoming happier.
Absolutely. Gratitude is a funny thing because it doesn't always come naturally. And part of the reason for that is that we have what evolutionary psychologists call the negativity bias. The negativity bias, which is always be on the lookout for the bad thing. Good things are nice to have, bad things can do you in. So if you're at a party and somebody's smiling sweetly at you from across the room, it's nice. But if somebody's frowning angrily at you from across the room, pay attention, because that actually might do you in once you go out on the street. That's how our bodies our brains are wired to help us survive. But the result of that is that it's maladapted to the current environment by giving us a bias toward the negative around us. And that's why you can be, I don't know, you're sitting in first class on an airplane complaining about the food. That's how that works. And we tend to be resentful. We tend to forget the nice things that we have. You can be in a safe country like the UK, in a warm home, in a soft bed, and be really mad about the pillow, because we tend to focus on the negative part. That's how we're wired as people. The way to counteract that, and to actually be more in touch with reality of our modern lives, is to make a list of the things that you're really grateful for and pay attention to those things. That way you're manually using your prefrontal cortex to focus on what you should be focused on. It will give you much more happiness, and you'll have a better life as a result of that. My students, they write down the things they're most grateful for on Sundays. Every day during the week, they look at their lists. On Sundays, they update their lists. And by the end of 10 weeks, they're 12% happier. This is free, and everybody should be doing it.
And then you also, I mean, we'll go through, and there's something for everyone in this book, and then all of it for everyone as well. And I think some people will focus on certain elements and know they need that a lot more in their life. But I think it's fascinating the way in which you sort of question empathy.
Hmm.
And I did not think this. I thought that having empathy and having a lot of empathy is something that we should all aspire to have. But you
Yeah.
question actually how happy that makes you. And I wonder if you can explain why.
Yeah, I mean, empathy tends to be kind of an overrated virtue in our modern society. It's feeling somebody else's pain, and there's a lot of good that can come from that. It's not the same thing as sympathy. Empathy is really relating to the pain that somebody else is going through, physically, or even more important, emotionally, they're going through. It's overrated because we have a tendency to substitute it for action and compassion. Compassion starts by feeling somebody else's pain, then it proceeds to not being paralyzed by somebody else's pain, and then finishes by not being afraid to do what actually needs to be done to help somebody. Now, that's really important. The worst parents of teenagers I've ever met are unbelievably empathetic. You're feeling so much pain. I'll call your teacher. I'll try to relieve your pain. That's terribly uncompassionate ordinarily, because people need to actually grow up, and people need to feel the pinch of what life is really all about. The most compassionate parents, they suffer with their children, but they're not paralyzed by that suffering, and they do things that are really, really hard, even when their kids don't like it. Bosses need to be compassionate as opposed to just empathetic. And in general, you make life a lot better for yourself and a lot better for others if you have the courage and understanding of compassion, which is not limbic. It really comes from making decisions and being reasoned about what you do, as opposed to simply being, the feeling of other people's pain, which is a highly limbic phenomenon.
Mm. Let's just get some more explanations or examples from you so people can take it into their own lives. So you've given the example of a parent, but if you feel like you're someone who's prone to over empathy, or even if you're just looking at situations anew with this in mind, how do you say go out into your life and be more compassionate in a way that makes you a happier person?
For sure. And, there's lots of examples, by the way, of how empathy makes less happiness around us. What you find is, if you're an overly empathetic person, the person who's in front of you right now who's suffering will actually get what they need. They'll get the favors, and you'll be paralyzed from doing what most people need. We see this a lot from politicians, where politicians were swayed by the plight of somebody who's right in front of them, actually leads them to make a decision that's not the greatest good for the most people, for the greatest number of constituents, or even for their country. And we find that this over empathy that we find in our modern political system can become a real problem. You can be clouded in your decision making, and that can result in the welfare of people falling, and your own welfare falling as well. So that's one of the reasons that we need to kind of question the baseline emotions that we feel, to always interrogate the feelings that we have, this is one of the things. And by the way, this is not just some super analytical scientific Western approach. This is the basis of self-analysis in Buddhism. Buddhists will meditate, and they will analyze their own emotions. They'll say, while they're meditating, what is the nature of my sadness? And in so doing, they're making it highly metacognitive, such that they can actually use their emotion in the most productive way, while they're not being paralyzed by that emotion or induced to do something that's against their interests and hurts other people as well.